In Europe, U.S. President Donald Trump addressed NATO today, speaking at a ceremony dedicated to NATO support following 9/11. At the speech, Trump called on NATO members to pay their fair share of alliance dues. For more, we head live to Brussels, where RT's Anastasia Churkina is standing by. Anastasia, how did the meetings go between Trump and EU NATO officials?
Well, it's certainly been quite a welcome mat rolled out here for Donald Trump in Brussels. It's been a charm offensive, and we do know that EU and NATO officials have basically been walking on eggshells ahead of his arrival to Brussels on his first official visit to the headquarters of the European Union as well as NATO, because, of course, as you recall, Donald Trump in the past had made quite controversial statements about both. Specifically, he called NATO obsolete at one point, although he seemed to reverse on those words quite shortly after, several months afterwards. But still, officials here did not quite know what to expect, and so they made sure that Donald Trump leaves with a sense of satisfaction and a sense of the relevancy of this organization, especially considering he's also at one point threatened to leave NATO potentially. So really, we've seen top EU officials meeting with him. The French president separately met him for lunch, but the key meeting here in Brussels was, of course, the meeting with NATO leaders, where public statements in more detail were made. And one of the opportunities, really, that Trump took in this situation was to tell off NATO leaders for not contributing enough money to the organization.
23 of the 28 member nations are still not paying what they should be paying. If all NATO members had spent just 2% of their GDP on defense last year, we would have had another $119 billion for our collective defense and for the financing of additional NATO reserves.
Well, this is certainly something that Donald Trump has been quite persistent in terms of pushing other NATO members to contribute the 2% GDP, which hasn't been really making a lot of European capitals happy. Now, Trump also talked about the future of NATO, which to some extent should have come as some sort of relief, considering there is a future to speak of. He talked about how it's going to be crucial to focus on fighting terrorism as well as issues of migration and, of course, the also beloved Russia threat, something that Western leaders always like to hear. But we have to be also clear that even on something like Russia, it hasn't been quite straightforward here in Brussels, because after meetings with top EU diplomats, we did see the president of the European Council, Donald Tusk, say that they don't necessarily see eye to eye.
I am not 100% sure that we can say today, we means Mr. President and myself, that we have a common position, common opinion about Russia.
So certainly lots still to work out, but it seems that now that the U.S. president has departed from the Belgian capital, there seems to be a bit of a sigh of relief that at least something too controversial didn't happen, and he did get the NATO members to agree to formally and officially get involved and back the anti-ISIL coalition. So for Donald Trump, that has been good news and something that he was hoping to achieve while here in Brussels.
Anastasia, many anticipated Trump would back Article 5, the mutual assistance clause in the NATO charter, making it the first time he would do so publicly. But it appears that's not what happened.
Well, that's right. That is indeed something that officials here in Brussels were expecting to kind of get in return for all this charm and welcoming events that they were putting together for Donald Trump. They were hoping that this would be the moment where he would officially endorse Article 5, which, of course, is the core of what NATO is really all about. The article concerning collective defense and, where members agree that if one nation is attacked, others would get involved. And so lots of media reports and lots of speculation amidst diplomats here that this would actually happen today, especially at the 9/11 memorial where he was speaking, because that was the one time in history where that article was actually invoked. That hadn't happened.
Thank you so much for covering these meetings. That was RT's Anastasia Churkina.